The Battle of Picacho Peak, also known as the Battle of Picacho Pass, which took place in Arizona on April 15th of 1862, holds the distinction of being the westernmost battle of the Civil War. Although one can hardly call it a battle, it was barely a skirmish, and it took place with only less than 24 combatants on either side, as comparison to the big battles in the East, which featured thousands of combatants on either side. But here it is called a battle, and here's how it came down. In 1848, the United States and Mexico concluded the Mexican War with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. By the terms of that treaty, Mexico ceded the territories of Arizona and New Mexico to the United States. Further land was purchased from Mexico by the United States in the Gadsden Purchase of 1853. So although Arizona and New Mexico were United States property, they were largely ignored by the government in Washington, D.C., which focused its energies on California. Thus, Arizona, for the first several years of its existence as United States property, was sparsely populated. Given its climate and the fact that the native peoples tended to resist vigorously any attempts to encroach on their land, few people ventured to come here, let alone stay. The largest population center was Tucson. There were a few scattered army posts and several mounting stations of the Butterfield Overland Stagecoach Company. Beginning in 1861, the inhabitants of Tucson, tired of the neglect from Washington, D.C., met, declared themselves to be the Confederate territory of Arizona, and sent representatives to the Confederate Congress in Richmond, Virginia. Both the United States and the Confederacy saw the need of keeping the Butterfield Stagecoach Line mounting stations open and operating as long as possible, and both set about doing this in their own separate ways. The Confederates sent a provisional government, or set up a provisional government in the town of Mesilla, near what is now Las Cruces, New Mexico, to administer the Confederate territories of Arizona and New Mexico. The United States composed an army unit called the California Column under the command of Colonel, later Brigadier General, James Carleton. They established a forward base in Fort Yuma, which is on the California side of the border, and the Confederates had a small outpost in Tucson. Both army units were aware of the other's existence somewhere in the wilds of Arizona, and Carleton had warned his subordinates not to engage the Confederates unless they had appropriate reinforcements. On April the 15th of 1862, Lieutenant James Barrett, along with 11 other troopers and a scout by the name of Pauline Weaver, a male named Pauline, he's in another clip, were prowling around the area of the area around the base of the mountain of Picacho Peak. They came upon 3 Confederates and eagerly charged and collected their 3 captives, not realizing that 7 other Confederate troopers were hidden in the rocks on the slopes of the peak. A firefight ensued, and Lieutenant Barrett, along with 2 other Yankees, was killed, and 3 others were injured. However, the 3 captives, which included Sergeant Henry Holmes of the Confederate Arizona Rangers and 2 of his men, were eventually captured and taken back to Fort Yuma. Although the Confederates technically won the day because the Yankee forces retreated and they lost more men, ultimately the Confederates were unable to exploit their victory. In July, Confederate forces in Arizona and New Mexico pulled back to El Paso in Texas, and by 1863, all Confederate activity, or most of it other than a few militias, was ceased in Arizona, and it became a Union territory. Finally, in 1863, the United States established the Union Territory of Arizona with headquarters at Fort Whipple, which later on became the town and territorial capital of Prescott. Nevertheless, the fact that this was only a cavalry battle, no artillery or infantry units participated, and it was not a full-scale Civil War engagement. Every March, hundreds, if not thousands, of reenactors and Civil War buffs converge on the national park at Picacho Peak and conduct a full-scale Civil War battle complete with cavalry, infantry, and artillery. Picacho Peak can be seen on the right side of I-10 as you're traveling from Phoenix toward Tucson. It's about halfway between Casa Grande and Tucson, and the spindle of Picacho Peak is very easily visible from the roadside when you're traveling along I-10. So it's a very easy spot to find and a very interesting place of Arizona history.